The screen flickered, static crawling in jagged streaks across the image. The news anchor sat rigid behind his desk, his face hollow, the dark circles under his eyes carving deep trenches into his skin. The studio lights above him flickered weakly, their power failing, barely illuminating the bleak backdrop behind him. It showed a map, once marked with clusters of major cities, red zones for outbreaks, green for safe zones. There was no green left. He swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing against the stiff collar of his shirt. The tie he had started the week wearing was gone, lost in the chaos, and his sleeves were rolled up, stained with something dark. His voice, when it finally came, was hoarse, cracking like old paper. This is the final transmission from what remains of the National Emergency Broadcast System. The words hung in the air, as heavy as tombstones. We are. He paused, as if measuring his own words, trying to keep from breaking. Officially advising that all remaining survivors shelter in place. The United States government, what's left of it, has failed to contain the outbreak. A deep exhale, his fingers trembled as he reached for the stack of papers before him, useless now, filled with old reports and casualty numbers that no longer mattered. The world didn't count the dead anymore. The military response is non-existent. The last confirmed safe zones, Denver, St. Louis, New York, are dark. Communications have ceased. Air traffic is gone. No ships, no convoys, no evacuations. His lips twitched, a grim, humorless smile. There is nowhere left to go. A sharp crack echoed off screen. A gunshot. The anchor flinched but didn't turn his head. He knew what it was. They all did. Someone in the studio was opting out. He exhaled through his nose and pressed on, his voice an emotionless drone. Maine is the last confirmed holdout. Winter's Hollow, a fortified settlement, remains intact. The people there are armed, supplied, and prepared for what's coming. If you can make it there, you might have a chance. Something flickered behind his dead eyes. Hope? No, not hope. Doubt. He leaned forward, his fingers lacing together as he finally looked directly into the camera. The feed wavered, static creeping along the edges, but his voice was clear, direct, final. To those who are listening, if there's anyone left to listen, a deep breath. They are coming. The things we once thought were myths, nightmares, they are real. They are not like the stories. They do not fear crosses, garlic, running water. They do not sleep in coffins. They do not rest. The studio lights flickered again. This time they didn't come back on. A shadow moved in the background, just beyond the glass walls of the studio. The anchor didn't turn to look. They are patient. They are relentless. They do not die easily. The only thing they fear is hunger. A scraping sound against the glass. The anchor exhaled through his nose, slow and steady. His shoulders slumped slightly. He looked tired. So tired. If you're hearing this, his voice was almost a whisper now. You are the last. You are alone. A hand pressed against the glass behind him. Thin fingers, too long. The nails had grown into points. The skin stretched tight over bone. The anchor closed his eyes. God help you all. The screen cut to static. The sky over Winter's Hollow was the color of an old bruise, deep purple fading into sickly gray. The smoke had been rising from the south for hours now, curling in thick black tendrils against the snow-heavy clouds. Another town gone, another settlement lost. Lucas Graves adjusted the sight on his rifle, trying to ignore the gnawing feeling in his gut. He had seen it before, how the fires burned, how the darkness swallowed places whole. The vampires didn't just kill, they consumed. Towns vanished under their slow, methodical invasion. Now they were coming for Maine. From his watchtower, he could see the perimeter wall, a makeshift fortress of scavenged metal and reinforced timber. Snow had begun to collect in the gaps. It wouldn't hold forever. Neither would they. Behind him, Winter's Hollow stirred with uneasy energy. 500 people, all of them survivors, fighters, or too broken to know the difference anymore. The fortified town had held for months, but it had always been a question of when, not if. A wind howled through the trees, sending a shiver through the pines, and Lucas pulled his coat tighter around him. A guard below shouted, snapping him from his thoughts. Movement near the tree line. Lucas swung his rifle scope toward the darkened woods. Something shifted between the trees, barely more than a shadow against the growing night. The fog had started creeping in, thick and slow, like it was being pulled toward the walls. Then he saw her. A woman, barefoot, no coat, no gloves, nothing but a tattered dress that hung from her like old skin. Her arms were wrapped around herself, shaking, her lips blue from the cold. She took a step forward, then stumbled, nearly collapsing into the snow. Lucas lowered his rifle. Jesus, he muttered. The gate guards hesitated, their rifles raised but uncertain. The rule was clear. No one gets in after sundown. But she looked half dead already, more frozen than turned. Help me, she choked out. Her voice was raw, barely more than a whisper. Lucas frowned. Something about her tone was off. Then she lifted her head, and he saw her eyes. Not red, not glowing, black, pitch-dark voids, where her pupils should have been, where humanity should have been. A shudder crawled through him. One of the guards fired. The shot punched through her chest, knocking her back into the snow. She didn't scream, didn't flinch, didn't even react. For a moment, the only sound was the wind through the trees. Then she twitched. Her spine snapped as she pushed herself upright. The hole in her chest didn't bleed, just gaped open like torn fabric. Then she smiled. Lucas stepped back from the edge of the tower. Shut the gates, he ordered. The woman laughed, a wet, broken sound that crawled under the skin. Then the trees behind her shifted. Not the wind, something moving. Many things moving. They were watching. The guards below backed away from the wall, their weapons shaking in their hands. They had fought raiders, taken down infected, but this was different. The woman took another step forward, her bare feet sinking into the snow. Her breath didn't fog. She tilted her head, listening. Then softly, she whispered, "You think you're ready?" Her voice wasn't hers anymore. It was many voices, layered and hollow, stretching into something inhuman. Then, without another word, she turned and walked back into the fog. Lucas stared after her, his pulse hammering against his ribs. She hadn't been here to attack. She had been testing them. The vampires knew Winter's Hollow was here. They were watching, waiting, and when they decided the time was right, they would come. The power failed at 3:17 a.m. Lucas woke to the sound of silence, not the usual kind, the distant murmurs of night watchmen, the creak of the walls settling against the cold. This was absolute silence, a dead silence, the kind that suffocated, that smothered breath and thought alike. Then the emergency sirens blared. Lucas bolted upright, his heart already slamming against his ribs. The bunker light above his cot flickered, then died completely, plunging his room into darkness. He knew they cut the power. His boots hit the frozen floor as he snatched his rifle from beside his bed. The radio on the wall hissed with static, voices breaking in and out, frantic, breathless. Power's out, movement inside the walls. We've got a breach. Lucas was out the door before the last word crackled through. The town was chaos. People staggered out of their homes, flashlights jerking wildly in the dark, their breath curling in thick plumes against the freezing air. The sky was empty. No moon, no stars, just a thick, oppressive void pressing down from above. Lucas shoved past a group of survivors scrambling to relight the torches along the barricades. The weak, flickering flames did little to push back the night. The firelight caught on figures moving at the edges of the walls, just beyond the reach of sight. The vampires were here. He vaulted up the watchtower ladder, his breath burning in his throat. The town's floodlights should have been cutting through the fog. The wall's defensive turrets should have been active, but everything was dead. The generator had been working yesterday. He knew because he'd checked it himself. The town had redundant backups, fail-safes, and yet... "Where's the breach?" Lucas barked. One of the guards was gripping the tower's rail so tightly his knuckles had gone white. His face was drained of color. "Everywhere," he said. Lucas followed his gaze, and his stomach turned to ice. The gate was still intact. The walls were still standing, but the vampires were inside. Shadows moved between the buildings, dark figures slipping between alleys, crawling over rooftops, vanishing behind homes. They hadn't come in through the gates. they had let themselves in. A scream split the air, cut off too fast. Then another. Gunfire erupted near the eastern barricade, but it was erratic, panicked. People were shooting at ghosts, at things that were there one moment, gone the next. Lucas's radio crackled, a voice shouting through the static. "They're toying with us. They're not attacking. The line went dead. Then came the laughter. Not human. A low, wet, guttural chuckle that curled in the air, wrapping around them like smoke. Lucas swung his rifle toward the rooftops, searching. There, a figure perched atop a burned-out house, crouched like a hungry animal. Thin, almost skeletal, but strong, impossibly strong. Its sunken eyes glowed like embers, hollow and endless. It was grinning, then it vanished. The radio screamed. "They're inside the church." Lucas was already moving. He hit the ground running, boots pounding against the frozen dirt as he raced toward the church, Winter's Hollow's last fallback point. Gunfire popped off in bursts, but it wasn't enough. It was never enough. He reached the church doors just as something slammed into them from the inside. The wood splintered under the impact, a muffled cry from within. Lucas didn't hesitate. He threw his shoulder into the doors. They gave way beneath him. Into darkness. He barely had time to register the blood on the floor before something moved in the shadows. The doors slammed shut, sealing Lucas inside the church. The air was thick with the scent of rot, a cloying, stagnant heaviness that clung to the back of his throat. The only light came from the weak, flickering glow of a few scattered lanterns, casting long, jagged shadows along the pews. Something dripped nearby. Lucas's boots slid against the floor as he moved forward, his rifle raised. The blood was fresh, soaking into the old wood beneath him. Bodies, not turned yet, just torn apart, lay in shredded heaps down the center aisle. A sound slithered through the darkness, not breathing, not footsteps, something dragging. Lucas turned slowly, his finger tightening on the trigger. The priest, Father Colton, was against the altar, his breath coming in short, uneven gasps. His robes were torn, his abdomen split open in long, surgical gashes, but he was still alive. Lucas moved toward him, stepping carefully. The priest's eyes flickered up, wide with horror. Lucas opened his mouth to speak. The priest shook his head violently. His fingers twitched, one barely lifting from the floor, pointing behind Lucas. A whisper of movement. Lucas spun, fired. The bullet punched into something that wasn't there. Then, suddenly, it was. A vampire erupted from the shadows, its body unfolding in an unnatural, twisted motion. Lithe, long-limbed, almost skeletal, but fast, too fast. It lunged. Lucas sidestepped effortlessly, pivoting with practiced precision. The vampire's claws slashed through empty air, its momentum carrying it forward. Lucas raised his rifle, fired 2 rounds. The first bullet shattered the vampire's kneecap. The second ripped through its throat, severing spine. The thing collapsed in a twitching heap at his feet, dead before it hit the ground. Lucas didn't hesitate. He moved like a ghost, weaving through the burning wreckage of the church, his rifle never still, his aim never off. Every shot counted. Every movement was deliberate. Another creature lunged from the shadows. Lucas ducked, bringing up his knife in a fluid motion, severing its head from its shoulders in a single strike. Another gunshot, gone. Another blade, gone. It was perfect. A one-man war. A soldier who had seen this nightmare before, and yet they kept coming. A door exploded inward, wood splintering as the vampire leader entered. Unlike the others, it didn't lunge immediately. It stood still, watching him, studying him. Lucas squared his shoulders, reloaded with smooth efficiency. The creature tilted its head, smiled. Impressive. Lucas fired. The bullet slammed into the vampire's forehead, but the thing twisted midair, dodging by a fraction of an inch. Lucas didn't falter. He adjusted, fired again, this time clipping its shoulder. The vampire staggered back. It felt that one. Lucas pressed forward, ruthless, precise. He fired again, but the thing was faster. It was suddenly right in front of him, too close for a shot. Lucas didn't blink. His knife was already in his hand. He plunged the blade into its ribs, twisting. The vampire snarled, not in pain but annoyance. Enough. Its hand snapped up. Lucas dodged, narrowly avoiding its grasp. The thing smiled wider. You don't even realize it yet. Lucas said nothing. He drove the knife higher, into its sternum, twisting until he heard bone crack. The vampire choked on its own breath. Lucas grabbed his lighter, a flick of his thumb. A tiny spark. The vampire's eyes flicked downward, just as Lucas dropped the flame. The world exploded. Fire rushed up the walls, igniting the pews, crawling across the floors, up the altar. The vampires shrieked, their bodies blackening, splitting, curling inward like burned paper. Lucas moved through the chaos untouched. Lucas stepped out into the cold. The church roared, flames punching into the night sky. The vampires inside were dying, but not all of them. The leader, it had escaped. Lucas could still feel it watching. He pushed himself up, panting, shaking. The town was gone. Winter's Hollow was gone. He looked south. The rest of the world had already fallen. And now, Maine had too. Lucas squeezed his eyes shut. Then he turned and started walking. He made it 10 steps before his breath caught in his throat. Something was off. A dampness, warm. His fingers brushed his neck and came away wet. Lucas stared at the slick red smearing his fingertips, brow furrowing. He hadn't been hit, hadn't been touched. Had he? The realization came slow, crawling, dread sinking like a stone. His stomach dropped. He had been bitten.